Well, in the end, it was close, really close, as it had looked all weekend. But it was Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari that used that increased grip level of the Ferrari on the slower corners to do the lap, just beating Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Very, very tight though it was. Max still very quick on the straight, but possibly made an error at the end of Q2 when he asked for 3 more clicks of front flap, which is the only part of the aero on the car that you can adjust during qualifying when they're in Parc Fermé. And with that, he potentially lost a bit of balance, and we'll have a look at that in a minute in terms of the sector times, comparing his lap with that of Sergio Perez. But let's not take it away from Charles Leclerc. It wasn't that long ago, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, when I was beating the drum about Charles, saying that he was one of the world's top 3 drivers, up there with Lewis and Max. And I got a few rude comments, I think it's probably fair to say, on the YouTube channel and elsewhere. But I've always stood by that ever since watching him in Formula 3, Formula 2. The guy has this beautiful soft touch, and he can delve really deep under pressure and put those laps together. And Carlos Sainz had looked very good in the Ferrari all weekend. The news as Saturday broke was that Ferrari decided to change everything on Carlos's car, and that he will be starting now, not with a 10-place grid penalty, but from the back of the grid. So all credit to Carlos to try to give Charles a tow, and he did a little bit. He did a little bit of that. You would have thought the most logical place for that would have been on where the speed trap is, out of the tight bit at the top, and then that long straight down into the chicane before the next run up into scene. But possibly because Charles didn't want to be too close to Carlos where the downforce was critical through that tight section, even though the 2022 cars should make it easier for him to follow. On both laps in Q3, it was Carlos helping Charles out of scene, moving to the right, leaving Charles have a bit of a boost going into scene on that second part of that, the main straight, the Mistral straight there. So it helped him a little bit, but I think more it was a beautifully sculpted lap by Charles, maximising all the positive points of the Ferrari and doing really well on the quick corners as well. Through the horseshoe, the corner I've been talking about all weekend, and on the live stream actually in the build up to Ricard, which is a defining corner I think, and where Lewis Hamilton definitely looks to have an advantage over George Russell. Perhaps not on the telemetry, but certainly to the naked eye. That beautiful soft early entry that he has in the second part of the horseshoe really helped, I think, Charles Leclerc on that lap. So congratulations to him, really good lap. I was thinking before Q3 that it's going to be somebody, it's either going to be Max or Charles under 1:31, and it was Charles. And when you get under a barrier, it just makes that lap, that pole lap, that much sweeter as well. So 30.8, really, really good lap. Max Verstappen then will be starting on the front row, but on the dirty side of the grid in P2, but he's got his teammate Sergio Perez to the left of him on the clean side of the grid, so it's not that much of a worry for him. For Max, certainly the first half of Saturday looked to be just a repeat of Friday, really quick on fuel runs in FP3, did another run, and then equally very, very good on light fuel as well. But let's have a look at those light fuel runs in FP3 to see if there are any pointers there of what was going to happen. Max Verstappen 32.2, 334, getting quicker and quicker on the straight. Carlos Sainz 32.6. 325. This is in the knowledge that he's going to be starting from the back of the grid, but he's going to do a really good job in qualifying. And then Charles Leclerc 32.9. Interestingly, both Ferraris did 2 runs on the soft tyre. Charles Leclerc starting to hone his feel for the car, having been a little bit behind Carlos Sainz in terms of getting a really clean lap with light fuel so far that weekend. But Max Verstappen just doing the 1 run, and perhaps that is one of the reasons, again, that Max wasn't able to get it right together at the end of Q3. Red Bull will probably be saying, the race is Sunday, we're focusing on the race, don't worry about it, Max. He had an extra run yesterday. But in his mind, Max Verstappen is probably saying, I need to do more and more runs on the soft tyre, because we can't keep having these qualifying sessions where I'm losing the pole by a couple of tenths. So probably it was there. Probably Red Bull lulled into thinking that 32.2 was going to be good enough to be really taking the fight to Ferrari for the pole. But indeed, it wasn't enough, because when qualifying began, it was very clear that Ferrari had got a really good balance on both cars. And you can't really blame it on changing conditions either, because in FP3, ambient temperature was 29-30, track temperature was 53-54. And by the time they got to Q3, track temperature was 54 and ambient temperature was 30. The temperature dropped a little bit during qualifying. So if anything, FP3 was a direct pointer on what was going to happen in Q3. Charles Leclerc did that amazing 30.8. top speed 330 miles an hour, basically where they'd been all weekend. This isn't showing that little bit of speed he picked up going into scene. But look at the sector times, 22.6 in sector 1, Max Verstappen 22.8. And that's because I think going into the final run of Q3, Max asked for 3 more clicks of the front flap just to get a little bit more downforce at the front. He'd been complaining about understeer all weekend, and it looks there as if he didn't get the extra grip, but what he got was imbalance. Because look at Sergio Perez in sector 1, 22.7, Max Verstappen 22.8. That to me, and Perez just running a car that's pretty balanced from the start of qualifying, that to me suggests that they went too far or something wasn't right again on the balance of the Max Verstappen car, because he should have been quicker than Sergio Perez through sector 1. In the second sector, which includes the straight line speed, you can see Charles Leclerc 27.9, Max Verstappen 27.8, a tenth quicker. But look at the difference in top speed, 330 for Charles Leclerc, 338 for Max Verstappen. That's almost 10 kilometers an hour. There was a graphic on the screen this morning during FP3 showing the amount of time that Mercedes lost to Red Bull on the straights around the lap of Ricard, and it was an amazing 1.49 seconds. So it would have been closer for the Ferraris, but if that's the case, what's Max Verstappen doing, only being a tenth quicker than Charles Leclerc in sector 2, which include the straights? Well, factor in a little bit of Carlos Sainz there. Certainly Max didn't get a tow from Sergio Perez. And then look at sector 3 again, Max 40.4, really, really good through the horseshoe, driving beautifully. Sergio Perez, 40.5, only a tenth quicker in sector 3. You would imagine Max would be more than that. So that to me adds up to a Red Bull that Max played around with, took a bit of a gamble just to see what would happen, and it went the wrong way. I don't think there was enough time really to discuss it, and certainly after qualifying there was a bit of talk about, we'll go through what happened there, Max, and we'll discuss it now. So yeah, Red Bull presumably will go back to square one in terms of front flap for Max Verstappen tomorrow and live with Ferrari's better grip on the slower corners, but this huge advantage on the straight, which is going to come into its own, of course, in race conditions. So for me, the most significant thing about those Q3 fastest laps is obviously the Charles Leclerc lap, which is a beautiful lap. But beyond that is how close Sergio Perez, relatively speaking, was to Max Verstappen today. A good performance from Sergio. Right from the start of today, at the beginning of FP3, he was really quick, much better in the car than he looked yesterday. So he looked very scrappy yesterday, but he suddenly found a balance, or they found a balance for him, and he got the lap together. So this is Sergio Perez right back into playing this proper role, this support role for Max Verstappen. Although there was a moment in Q1, come to think of it, when Max came in and said, what was Checo doing going slowly in the middle of my lap? So yeah, no doubt there'll be a bit of talk about that as well in the Red Bull motorhome this evening. Quite a lot to talk about there, I would imagine. Whereas at Ferrari, I'm sure there's a lot of backslapping going on and a lot of hugging, and thank yous, Carlos, and congratulations to Charles Leclerc. And they will be sitting back and thinking, okay, let's see what Red Bull do in the race tomorrow. We've got the pole, we've got a very good car. Now it should be good in terms of its tyre management. Maybe it'll be the same as Austria. That's presumably what they'll be hoping and looking for. Look who qualified. P4, Lewis Carl Hamilton. Didn't even drive the car in FP1 yesterday when Nick de Vries took over for his annual outing. But great lap by Lewis Hamilton, 31.7. Look at George Russell, 32.1. And George right on the edge of getting through into Q3 as well. Lewis getting right out there, looking like a young, hungry lion, full of motivation. 3.28 on the straight, not bad at all. If you look at all the opposition around them, you've got Fernando Alonso 3.30 in the Alpine, Lando Norris 3.28 in the McLaren Mercedes as well. So Mercedes factory team, pretty good on the straight and really good through sector 3 as well. So congratulations to Lando. He'll be really happy. McLaren in general will be really happy with that splitting, or being the filling in the sandwich of the Mercedes sandwich. Really good. And just for reference, Daniel Ricciardo actually will be listed now as qualifying 9th because he was 11th, and with both Kevin Magnussen and Carlos Sainz having to start from the back of the grid, power unit penalties. That elevates Daniel Ricciardo to P9. But to put that into perspective, he was 0.2 slower than Lando under pressure in Q2. And if you relate Lando's Q3 time, when they wind the car up a little bit, to Daniel's best in Q2 is 0.9 of a second. So, yep, Daniel Ricciardo, please advise. And Esteban Ocon is the other driver who will now make it through to top 10th. He'll qualify, start 10th. He was 0.4 behind Fernando when they were on equal footing in Q2 and ended up 0.5 behind in Q3. So a little bit of a disappointing day for Esteban Ocon, but not half as disappointing as it was for Pierre Gasly, who didn't even get out of Q1 in the AlphaTauri, even though Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate, as you can see there, did a really good job and got through into Q3. I put Carlos Sainz in there because he did this outstanding lap in Q2, did a 31.0 just to quieten everybody down. Just no pressure on him, of course, and it's always perhaps slightly easier to go out and put the lap together for Ferrari if you're a Ferrari driver when you're under no pressure. So really good lap by Carlos in Q2, and they were the numbers, 330 in a straight line, exactly the same as Charles Leclerc, 22.6, 27.9, 40.4 in Sector 3, whereas Charles did 40.2. No surprise, I put that all down to that horseshoe. Not going into the horseshoe because that it just leads you into an early turn-in. It's what they do with the car in the middle of that right-hander, which is turn 11. Whether they go back out to the outside or whether they can just manipulate the car to get into that second apex with a lovely early turn-in. And Carlos is going right to the outside, looking at the apex for the second part of the corner, second apex, and doing a lovely entry, a lovely exit. But Charles Leclerc is doing one of these beautiful Lando Norris's and Lewis Hamilton's, just superb to watch. And the other guy I'm feeling sorry for is Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. And one of the reasons, and he's starting from the back of the grid like Carlos Sainz, but one of the reasons I'm feeling sorry for him is because, well, I'm looking at the homework they did around him this morning in FP3 when it was fuel run time, track temperature 53, ambient 29. Look at the number of laps Kevin Magnussen strung together and look how consistent he is. Okay, he's not in a Ferrari or a Red Bull or even a Mercedes, but look at that. 40.1, 39.9, 40.0, 40.7, 40.8, 41.2, 41.1. If that isn't a driver putting his head down and getting lots of good homework together for a drive from the back of the grid tomorrow, I don't know what is. I just hope he gets through the first couple of corners, and I hope he has reliability and we can see that having the result it deserves. It's a really good run this morning from Kevin Magnussen. The only other three drivers who did long fuel runs this morning, interestingly, Ferrari, as I say, focused on the soft tyre on qualifying, were Max. We've talked about Max in that run. We talked about the fact that he did it, and look at his run again, 38s, just all 38s, and look how quick he was on the straight. For comparison, look at Lewis Hamilton, 286, 300, if he's doing really well. Max is cruising around at 315 top speeds. And then this is where Sergio Perez started to get it together as well. He got into a nice rhythm here, 39.4, 39.6, 39.3. Okay, again, not 38s, but he looked good in the car as well. So going back to Q3, Fernando Alonso, I don't think we mentioned too much about Fernando, 32.5, 330. As I say, he's doing about the same top speed as the Mercedes in the Alpine, which was a surprise. Esteban Ocon didn't even get through into Q3. And 23.0, 40.9 in Sector 3. Just looked like Fernando, looked really good in the car. Slight confusion over my comments yesterday about the Alpine not getting 8th gear. I was referring, of course, to the section of road from the chicane up to Scene where everybody else seems to be getting 8th a little bit before Scene and then holding 8th through Scene, depending on whether they're on fuel or not. But the Alpine on that section is staying in 7th. It's not getting 8th. Of course, they're getting 8th down the main straight where the speed trap is, but I'm talking about the bit from the chicane up to Scene. And I think, as I said yesterday, that could be significant with the longer gearing that Alpine presumably have around that engine. It could be significant when we get to somewhere really quick again, like Monza. So there we are. That was qualifying. I think it all comes down to Charles Leclerc, 330 kilometers an hour through the speed trap on his own with DRS, and Max Verstappen, 338 through the speed trap on his own with DRS, which of course they run in qualifying. Sergio Perez right behind Max on 337. So both Red Bulls right there. It's Charles Leclerc at the front of the grid. It's Carlos Sainz at the back. He'll be driving one of these races, hopefully through the back of the grid to score serious points and could well be in the running. And Lando Norris right up there between the two Mercedes. So McLaren making a really good recovery this weekend as well. Let's see how all of that translates into the race tomorrow. See you then.
When you put your hand in my jacket, I'm thinking so irrational. You flew me international now. And we can spend hours reading the signals, but that's so unoriginal. What if we took this back to my house? Under all these lights, I gotta take a minute to calm down. But I feel like if I